She came for a job, qualified, prepared, steady. But when Elena Moore walked through the doors of Boston's most elite hospital, she was denied not for what she lacked, but for who she was. No one expected her to speak up. No one imagined she'd dig deeper. No one knew her last name already lived in the building's forgotten history. What started as a routine job interview would unravel a 35-year-old cover-up, shake an entire institution to its core, and rewrite the legacy of a nurse they once tried to erase. Because when you bury the truth, you better pray the next generation doesn't come looking for it. And Elena, she didn't come looking for revenge. She came to finish what her mother started. The cold wind rolled down the steps of the Harper-Sloane Medical Center, the most prestigious hospital in Boston, biting through even the warmest coats. But for Elena Moore, who stood at the edge of the marble stairs, gripping a manila folder with both hands, it wasn't the wind that cut through her. It was the silence. 2 hours ago, she'd walked through the security checkpoint with her resume credentials and state nursing certification tucked under her arm, dressed in pressed navy scrubs and hope. She never even made it past the lobby. The receptionist had taken one look at her face, then at her name. There had been a flicker of something unease, maybe discomfort, before she leaned into the mic beside her desk. "Interview's been canceled," she said flatly. Elena blinked. "No, I confirmed twice this week. With HR and with sorry. Must have been a mistake in scheduling." Her voice didn't shift. "You'll have to reapply." Behind her, 2 white nursing students were ushered in with warm smiles and clipboards, both wearing Harper badges they hadn't had that morning. Elena stood there confused, then angry, then humiliated. No one had to say the reason out loud. She was young, black, not from any of the Northeastern Ivy League pipelines. A graduate of a small, historically black nursing college in the South with honors. But in places like this, honor wasn't the same as pedigree. She turned, stepped out into the wind, and began the long walk down the stone steps. Her phone buzzed, a message from her aunt in Charlotte. "You blow them away today, baby girl. I know they'll see your worth." She almost laughed, then almost cried. She was about to text back when a voice stopped her. "Excuse me." Elena turned. The man who had just stepped out of a black Range Rover was tall, mid-40s, wearing a charcoal gray suit and a coat that probably cost more than her student loans. His gaze was steady. Not cruel, just curious. "Are you Elena Moore?" he asked. Her back straightened. "I was. Not anymore." He tilted his head, confused. "I just came from the executive board. Your resume was the final review on our candidate list for this year's Innovation Fellowship. I was supposed to meet you at noon." Her throat went dry. She looked past him, back up the stairs. The security desk. The receptionist. He followed her glance. Then something in his face changed. "I'm Dr. Alden Chase," he said slowly. "Chief of Medicine." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Elena clutched her folder a little tighter, and Dr. Chase stared like he had just stumbled upon something the hospital wasn't ready to answer for. "Come with me," he said. Not cold, not formal, just firm. Elena hesitated, then followed. What she didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that the folder in her hand held not just her qualifications, but a piece of this hospital's forgotten past, a past it had tried very hard to bury, and that, by the time the week was over, Elena Moore would no longer be waiting for a seat at the table. She'd be the one setting it. The lobby of Harper-Sloane looked different from the inside. Not architecturally, the same marble floors, the same grand chandelier imported from Venice, the same concierge desk shaped like an altar. But through Elena Moore's eyes, it felt like stepping into a room where she wasn't just unwanted. She was actively unwelcome. Dr. Alden Chase walked 3 paces ahead of her. He didn't say a word, but every few seconds he turned slightly, as if checking that she was still behind him. Or maybe that she hadn't bolted. When they passed the front desk, the receptionist who had dismissed her earlier glanced up. Her lips parted. Her eyes flickered to Alden, then down. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Elena walked past her without breaking stride. Let them watch. They stepped into a private elevator at the west end of the hospital, the kind only department heads and donors used. It smelled like eucalyptus and power. "You have your resume?" Alden asked. Elena handed him the manila folder. He flipped it open, read silently as the elevator ascended, his brow furrowed. 4.0 GPA. Clinical internship at Children's of Atlanta. 2 published research briefs. Why hasn't anyone from HR reached out? "I confirmed my interview twice," she said calmly. "Once by phone, once by email. Got the address, the room number, the time. I was 15 minutes early. And," Elena met his eyes, "I was told the interview was canceled." Just as 2 other candidates were escorted in, he didn't speak for a moment. The elevator pinged. Floor 19, Executive Wing. As they stepped out, Alden turned to her. "I'm going to ask you something. And I want the truth." Elena waited. "Do you want to stay in this building, Miss Moore? Even knowing what it just did to you?" She didn't hesitate. "I didn't come here to be accepted. I came here to work. If they're uncomfortable, that's their problem." A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not amusement. Recognition. "Good," he said, "because I need someone who doesn't flinch." He led her down a quiet hall and into a private conference room. Sleek table, frosted windows, modern art on the walls. At the head of the table sat a man in his early 60s, white hair, dark suit, fingers laced. Dr. Russell Denton, Alden said, head of fellowship oversight. Denton didn't rise, just nodded, glancing at the folder Alden set on the table. "What's this?" "The final applicant for the Innovation Fellowship. She was never brought in for her interview." Denton raised an eyebrow. "I was told she declined." "No," Alden said sharply. "She was blocked." Denton glanced at Elena, then back at the folder. "She's non-traditional." Elena spoke for the first time. "I'm qualified." Denton leaned back. "Look, Ms. Moore, this is a competitive program. We have strict criteria. Our fellows tend to come from schools with stronger reputations, larger research portfolios. You seem capable, but I'm not from Dartmouth," Elena cut in, voice steady. "I'm not legacy. And I'm not what you expected when you heard the name Moore." Denton didn't respond. Alden crossed his arms. "Read her file," he said flatly, "before you embarrass yourself." 10 minutes later, Elena stood on the rooftop garden with Alden overlooking the Boston skyline. The wind was colder up here, but she liked it. "You didn't have to walk me in," she said quietly. "No," Alden agreed. "But I've been here 20 years. Watch the same names rise. The same faces occupy every conference. The same assumptions run unchecked." He turned to her. "You're not just smart. You're dangerous to them. Because you're a correction they can't control." Elena took a slow breath. "I don't want to be a symbol. Then be a storm." He handed her a hospital badge. "Temporary, but real. I'll see you Monday." She looked down at the badge, then back toward the building. What she didn't know was that in 2 weeks' time, she would uncover a personnel archive buried deep in the hospital's restricted files. A file with a name that matched hers, and that the reason she had been rejected had started long before she ever stepped foot in Boston. Monday morning arrived colder than expected. Boston's skyline was veiled in fog, and the city moved slowly, except for the Harper-Sloane Medical Center. It never stopped, never slept. It simply hummed like a machine, confident in its perfection. Elena Moore stood in front of the staff entrance badge clipped to her coat, hair neatly tied back. Her fingers flexed against the cold, but her eyes were steady. No hesitation, no flinching. Not today. The security guard at the rear entrance barely looked up as she passed. His scanner beeped green. She was in, really in. No escort. No closed doors. No detours back out to the stairs. Not anymore. The nurses' wing on the 3rd floor was already buzzing pages over the intercom carts, rolling code blue murmurs in the distance. Elena moved through the motion easily. She'd been in hospitals before. Just not ones like this. Everything here gleamed. The walls, the people, the pride. She was assigned to pediatrics, a temporary placement during her probationary period. The unit was calm, almost too quiet. As she entered, a nurse at the main station looked up, blinking at her badge. "You're new." "Yes, Elena Moore." There was a pause, just long enough. The nurse offered a tight smile. "You're not who we were expecting." Elena nodded. "I've been getting that a lot." She walked past her and got to work. By noon, she'd soothed a crying toddler without needing to page the family. By 2, she caught a dosage error on a prescription slip before it reached the attending physician. By 4, she'd reorganized the medication log for the unit's highest-risk patients, shaving a 30-minute process down to 12. Efficiency, grace, 0 mistakes. Still, no one asked her to stay for coffee in the break room. That was fine. She hadn't come here to belong. She'd come to make herself undeniable. Later that evening, as she finished charting patient notes, her hospital login flashed an error. Access restricted. Then, a second window opened. User permission override. Administrative review archive. Requested by Dr. A. Chase. She hesitated. The folder auto-opened. Hundreds of scanned files. Old personnel records. Paper documents now digitized. Notes from a former HR director who had resigned quietly 3 years ago. At the bottom of the folder was a smaller file labeled Moore Catherine, terminated 1987. Elena's breath caught. She clicked. It opened to a black and white photograph. A woman in nursing whites. Brown skin, sharp cheekbones. The resemblance was unmistakable. Her mother, except it wasn't possible. Elena had grown up in Atlanta. Her mother had worked local clinics. Nothing in her childhood hinted at a life in Boston, much less a job at Harper-Sloane. But the record was clear. Catherine Moore, licensed nurse, hired 1984. Terminated 3 years later for inappropriate conduct. There was no detail. No incident report. Just a note in red ink. Personnel file sealed at board request. Discretion advised. Elena sat back. The room spun quietly around her. This hospital hadn't just tried to block her. It had once erased someone with her name. Someone with her face. Someone they'd rather history forget. She printed the file and slipped it into her bag. Walked home in silence. Made tea she didn't drink. Sat on the floor of her apartment and stared at the faded photo for hours. That night, she opened the last email her mother had sent before she passed. It had no subject, just 2 words. Keep going. And now she understood. Her mother hadn't just worked in medicine. She had fought in it and lost. Elena had been hired because Alden Chase opened a door. But what came next? That was her choice. She wasn't here to complete a resume. She was here to finish a fight. Tuesday came quietly. Boston's skyline was covered in winter fog, and the kind that made buildings disappear into the gray. But inside Harper-Sloane Medical Center, everything moved like clockwork, the footsteps, the clipped voices, the polished pride of the place. Elena Moore didn't come in through the main lobby this time. She didn't need to. Her badge worked now. No more second glances. No more front desk dismissals, at least not today. She kept her head down and made her way to a part of the hospital few people visited, the archival wing. Not the digital system most staff used. This was older, quieter. A place where time was stored in boxes and memory lived on paper. She slipped through the door. The scent of aged documents and cool, dust-filtered air met her like a whisper. Elena didn't know what she was looking for until she found it. An employee ledger worn yellowed at the edges, marked 1984 to 1987. Her fingers moved slowly across the names. And then she stopped. Catherine Moore, registered nurse. Hired 1984. Terminated June 2nd, 1987. No reason listed. Just termination board action. Her throat tightened. And just beneath that, in faded pencil, someone had written 2 words. Board meeting. Elena didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stared. Because her mother had never told her she worked here. Not once. She flipped the page again this time, landing on a name that sounded vaguely familiar. Dr. Ernest Cabot, Chief Medical Officer. Retired now, but once a major force on the hospital's board. She made a note, then closed the book. She wasn't done yet. That afternoon, as Elena pushed a supply cart down the corridor of the post-op unit, she passed an older nurse, silver hair, sharp eyes, walking with a cane, but still moving with quiet command. Her name tag read Rothwell. Elena hesitated, then turned. "Excuse me, Ms. Rothwell." The woman stopped, raising an eyebrow. "I heard you've been here a long time," Elena said carefully. "Since the 80s. Rothwell's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "I'm Elena Moore." The name hit like a soft jolt, and Rothwell froze. Just long enough for Elena to know. "You knew her, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Catherine Moore. My mother." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was protective. Rothwell glanced up and down the hallway. Not here. They met in the break room just after midnight. The building was half asleep. The fluorescent lights hummed. Rothwell poured herself a cup of coffee, but didn't drink it. "I was new back then," she began. "Second-year floor nurse. Catherine trained me." "What was she like?" Elena asked. Rothwell smiled just a little. "Brilliant. The kind of brilliant that didn't ask for permission. Calm, graceful, knew more than some of the doctors, and that terrified them." Elena waited. She uncovered something Rothwell said finally. A pattern. Post-op infections that traced back to a cost-cutting decision made by someone higher up. She reported it. Elena's stomach turned. They called her reckless. Said she violated policy. That she was emotional, unstable, all the usual lies. And just like that, she was gone. "Gone," Elena repeated. "They fired her. No press, no protest, just erased her." Rothwell stood. "But before she left, she told me one thing. I never forgot it." She looked at Elena. She said, "They think I'm leaving empty-handed, but they don't know what I mailed." Mailed to herself or someone. I don't know. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Be careful, Elena. You're not the first Moore to walk these halls with your head held high." And then she was gone. The next morning, Elena skipped her shift and went straight to a post office, the one nearest to where her mother had once lived. It was newer now. Different. But the records were still there. After some gentle asking and one quiet phone call from Dr. Alden Chase, a clerk brought out an old book, a delivery log. And there it was. June 2nd, 1987. Seymour, certified mail, delivered. A package her mother mailed to herself. Elena stared at the entry like it was a ghost whispering across time. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to the one person her mother had always trusted, Aunt Geneva in Atlanta. Did Mom ever send something to herself back in '87, a certified package? The reply came almost instantly. "Yes. She told me to keep it safe, in case you ever needed it." Elena's heart caught. "It's still here, baby. Do you want it?" She stared at the screen, then typed back, "I'm coming home." The train pulled into Atlanta just after sunset. The sky was bruised gold, and the air felt different, warmer, softer. Elena stepped off with one small bag, and her thoughts still tangled in Boston. Waiting just past the gates was Aunt Geneva, wrapped in a cardigan, arms wide open. Her smile trembled. "You've got her eyes," she whispered, hugging Elena tight. "Your mother would have stood taller just seeing you." They didn't say much on the ride home. The house hadn't changed. Same porch, same creaky floorboards, same kitchen painted lemon yellow, smelling faintly of eucalyptus and cornbread. Aunt Geneva went to the hallway closet, reached up to the highest shelf, and pulled down a dented metal box. She set it on the kitchen table without a word. Elena sat across from her. The latch stuck for a moment, then gave way with a soft snap. Inside was a single manila envelope. Worn, thick, stamped with a postmark dated June 2nd, 1987. Her mother's name was written across it, in careful, confident handwriting. "If anything happens to me, give this to Elena." Elena's hands moved slowly as she opened the envelope. Inside were papers, dozens of them. The first was a map, a diagram of the 5th floor of Harper-Sloane Medical Center. Red X's marked specific storage rooms. Arrows pointed to equipment labs. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Next came a series of infection reports. Patient IDs, lab results, cultures matched to the same strain of bacteria, again and again. And every single case traced back to one thing: non-sterile surgical tools. The supplier's name was highlighted. The initials of the board member who approved the contract were circled. It was a clear, undeniable pattern. Her mother had found it, had documented it, had tried to stop it. The last page in the envelope was a resignation letter, but it was never mailed. It read, "This hospital is putting reputation above lives. If you choose silence, you are choosing harm. I will not stay quiet. I will not let you pretend not to know. Catherine Moore." Elena stared at the signature. Her mother hadn't just left a job. She tried to leave a warning. Across the table, Aunt Geneva wiped her eyes. She mailed that to herself the day she was fired, she said. Said one day you'd know what to do with it. Elena didn't speak. She looked out the window into the quiet Atlanta night. And in that silence, something inside her shifted. Her mother hadn't just worked at Harper-Sloane, she had challenged it, and they'd buried her for it, but not well enough. The next morning, Elena boarded a flight back to Boston. She didn't sleep. She didn't read. She just held the envelope in her lap like it was glass. When she got home, she laid the papers out on her kitchen table. One by one, she took a photo of everything. Then she picked up her phone. 3 names, 3 messages. First to Dr. Alden Chase. "We need to talk, privately." Second to Nurse Rothwell. "You were right. I have the file." And third, to a journalist her mother once trusted. Marcus Lane, the reporter who lost his job trying to investigate Harper-Sloane years ago. Her message to him was simple: "I have proof." Then she sat back, hands folded, heart steady. The truth had waited 35 years. Now it was ready to speak. And Elena Moore was going to make sure the world listened. Harper-Sloane Medical Center had always been proud of its silence, the way its marble floors swallowed footsteps, the way its staff spoke in low, controlled tones, the way problems disappeared before they made it past the 3rd floor. But that silence was about to break, and Elena Moore was the one holding the hammer. The day after she returned from Atlanta, Elena met Dr. Alden Chase in his office. No assistants, no secretaries. Just a closed door, a pot of black coffee, and the thick manila folder she set on his desk. He opened it slowly. At first he said nothing. "Just read. The map, the infection reports, the signature." When he finally looked up, his voice was low. "Where did you get this?" "My mother mailed it to herself," Elena said. "June 2nd, the day they fired her." Alden nodded once. "They buried it. They tried." He leaned back in his chair. The lines around his eyes looked deeper. "This is a liability. Not just for the board, for the hospital itself. People died," Elena said. "And they covered it up. Yes, people could still be dying if the same systems are in place." He looked at her carefully. "What do you want to do?" She didn't hesitate. "I want the truth made public. Not whispered, not minimized. I want names, responsibility, and accountability." He didn't flinch. "You'll be called a liar. I have evidence. They'll call it forged. I have timestamps, lab reports, a map. They'll say you're bitter." She paused. "I am." And for the first time, Alden Chase smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was finally honest. That night, Elena emailed everything to Marcus Lane, the reporter her mother once trusted. His reply came within 15 minutes. "I've been waiting for this for half my career." The next morning, an expose hit the front page of an independent Boston outlet. The headline was quiet, but devastating. "Buried at Harper-Sloane, the Catherine Moore papers." It spread like wildfire across Twitter, then LinkedIn, then into the inboxes of every medical administrator in New England. By noon, Harper-Sloane's press office issued a terse statement. "We are aware of allegations raised regarding hospital procedures in the 1980s. We take these claims seriously and are conducting a formal internal review." But it was too late. The damage was done. People were asking questions. Staff were whispering in elevators. And Elena? She walked the halls with a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of shame, but the silence of someone who knows she's being watched and walks forward anyway. Later that week, the board called a closed-door meeting. They invited Dr. Chase. They did not invite Elena. But that didn't matter, because one of the board members, a young attorney recently added to the ethics committee, had quietly leaked the agenda to Marcus Lane. And Marcus had already scheduled an interview with Elena. National broadcast. Monday night. Prime time. The title: The Nurse They Tried to Erase. That evening, as she walked through the hospital parking garage, Elena felt it. A car trailing too close. She turned, it stopped. The window rolled down. A man in a suit, early 50s, cold eyes. "You've made quite a mess," he said. Elena didn't respond. "We could have handled this internally. Protected you, elevated you. But now," he shook his head slowly, "you've made enemies you don't even understand." Elena stepped forward until she was directly at the window. "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore," she said, then turned and walked away. Her badge swiped green at the back entrance, and this time she didn't just belong. She was the one bringing the light in with her. It aired on a Monday night, 7:00 p.m. Eastern. A quiet lead-in, no flashy graphics, no dramatic music. Just a host in a navy suit and a title across the screen. The Nurse They Tried to Erase, the Elena Moore interview. The camera cut to her. Elena sat upright, her voice steady, her hands folded gently in her lap. Behind her, nothing but a soft gray backdrop. No props, no dramatization, just truth. She told them everything. How she was denied an interview at Harper-Sloane despite being fully qualified. How she discovered a file buried for 35 years. How that file contained infection reports, internal memos, and a resignation letter from a nurse who had tried to stop a cover-up, her own mother, Catherine Moore. She described the boardroom's silence, the erased records, the lives lost. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just told the truth and let the truth do the shouting for her. By Tuesday morning, the story had gone national. Cable news picked it up. Online outlets ran op-eds with headlines like, "She wasn't just qualified, that she was a threat to the system. The hospital that silenced a nurse now faces its reckoning." Das Catherine Moore trended on Twitter. So did Das Harper-Sloane. The hospital issued another statement. Longer, colder. "We cannot comment on personnel matters from 1987, but we are reviewing our policies and fully cooperating with legal counsel." Translation: they were sweating, because the silence wasn't working anymore. Inside the hospital, nurses wore black ribbons. Some quietly slid copies of Elena's story into patient waiting rooms. Others avoided eye contact. A few still whispered, "She's stirring things up," or "She doesn't know when to stop." But that didn't matter, because someone did speak. Someone unexpected. Dr. Rachel Holloway, senior board member, 27 years, at Harper-Sloane. She called a press conference. No camera crews, just local media. She stood behind a wooden podium in a hospital conference room and said plainly, "I was here in 1987. I knew Catherine Moore. I read the reports. I stayed quiet. The room fell still. I let her be erased. And I'm standing here today to say, she was right. We were wrong. And this hospital owes her family far more than an apology." That night, Elena returned home to a voicemail from Dr. Alden Chase. "They're calling an emergency board session. There's talk of resignations. Real ones this time." Then a second message from a law firm. "Ms. Moore, we'd like to speak with you regarding a formal class action inquiry." And a third, from someone who hadn't called in years. Her father, voice shaking. "I watched your interview. I didn't know half of it. But your mother would have been proud. I'm proud, if you're willing. I'd like to talk." Elena listened to all three messages, then sat in the dark staring at the ceiling, not overwhelmed. Just full, like for the first time the weight wasn't all hers to carry. The next morning she walked into Harper-Sloane with her head held high, and this time the whispers stopped when she passed. Not because they feared her, but because they finally saw her, not as a symbol. Not as a problem, but as a woman who told the truth and made the walls listen. It aired on a Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. No dramatic music. No flashing headlines. Just a quiet voiceover and a simple title on screen. The nurse they tried to erase the Elena Moore interview. Then it cut to her. Elena Moore sat under soft studio lights, her hands gently folded in her lap, her voice steady. Behind her, just a muted gray backdrop. No dramatics, no distractions. Just the truth. She told the story plainly, powerfully. How she'd been denied an interview at Harper-Sloane Hospital, despite being more than qualified. How she uncovered a buried file from 1987. How that file contained infection reports, internal memos, and a resignation letter from her mother, Catherine Moore, a nurse who tried to expose a dangerous cover-up. She talked about the boardroom silence, the erased records, the lives that were lost. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth spoke loudly enough. By Tuesday morning, the country was listening. Her story spread across cable news, radio blogs, medical forums. One headline read, "She wasn't just qualified. She was a threat to their comfort." Another, "Harper-Sloane erased a nurse. Her daughter brought her back." Sculptor Catherine Moore began trending on social media. So did daughter Harper-Sloane and daughter's justice for nurses. The hospital released a second statement. Longer, more careful. "We are reviewing policies from previous decades and fully cooperating with legal counsel." But it didn't say what everyone already knew. They were trying to contain a fire that had already jumped the walls. Inside Harper-Sloane, things changed overnight. Nurses wore black ribbons. Some printed Elena's story and quietly placed copies in patient lounges. Some looked away when she passed. Others nodded just slightly, but enough to say, "We see you now." And then someone unexpected broke the silence. Dr. Rachel Holloway, senior board member, 27 years at the hospital. She called a press conference of her own. No cameras, just a podium and a few chairs in the conference room. She stepped up, took a breath, and said, "I was here in 1987. I knew Catherine Moore. I read her reports, and I stayed quiet. The room froze. I let her be erased. And I want to say she was right. We were wrong. And this hospital owes her family more than an apology." It was the first real crack in the institution's armor, and the sound of it was undeniable. That night, Elena got 3 voicemails. The first was from Dr. Alden Chase. The board's in crisis mode. Emergency meeting scheduled. Talk of real resignations. I'll keep you posted. The second was from a law firm. Ms. Moore, we're reaching out regarding a potential class action inquiry related to medical negligence and cover-ups. We'd like to speak with you. The third was from someone she hadn't heard from in years. Her father. His voice was quieter than she remembered. "I saw the interview. I didn't know half of what your mother went through, but I'm proud of you. She would be too. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk." Elena sat in the dark for a long time after those messages. Not overwhelmed, not afraid, just full. Like for the first time, the weight she carried wasn't just hers anymore. The next morning, when she walked into Harper-Sloane, the whispers stopped. Not because they feared her, but because they finally saw her. Not as a problem, not as a symbol, but as a woman who told the truth and made the walls listen. By the end of the week, Harper-Sloane Medical Center wasn't just trending, it was trembling. 2 board members stepped down quietly. A third submitted a letter of retirement wrapped in legal jargon. Dr. Holloway's confession had opened the door, but it was Elena Moore who kept it open. She'd spoken calmly, clearly, with facts, and now the hospital was desperate to save its image. That's when the offer came. A sealed envelope, delivered to her locker in the nurses' wing. Inside a letter with the hospital seal. "Ms. Moore, in recognition of your leadership, we would like to formally invite you to join the Harper-Sloane Board of Ethics and Equity. Your experience and insight are invaluable to our future." It was signed by the new interim chairman, and it came with a generous stipend, a permanent position, and a seat at their table. That evening, Elena sat alone in her apartment. The envelope lay open on the counter. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she took out a piece of paper blank and began writing something of her own. Not a resignation, not a reply, a plan. The next day, she walked into the conference room where board meetings were held. Same long glass table, same sterile walls, same seats that had once voted her mother out of the hospital without a word. All eyes turned as she entered. Dr. Holloway stood. Ms. Moore, we're honored you came. Elena took her time before speaking. I'm not here to take a seat, she said. I'm here to propose something different. She pulled out a folder and set it on the table. Inside a framework for a new initiative. The Catherine Moore Fellowship, a year-long paid leadership and ethics training program for nurses of color, full tuition assistance, guaranteed hospital placement, mentorship from executive leadership, and full protection against retaliation. The room was quiet. One board member, older skeptical, asked, "And you expect the hospital to fund this?" Elena met his eyes. "I expect the hospital to repair what it broke. And to prove it, understands the difference between diversity and dignity." Another board member leaned forward. "Why not just join us? You'd have power from within." Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not asking to join. I'm building what should have existed in the first place. And I don't need permission to do it." She turned to leave, then paused. "But I'll tell you what you can do." She pointed to the nameplate at the end of the table, the seat once held by the chief of ethics. Put her name on that chair. Catherine Moore. Let every person who sits there remember whose silence built this place. And with that, she walked out. That afternoon, Dr. Chase found her by the employee garden, where a few nurses were on break. He handed her an envelope, a check, large enough to fund the first year of the fellowship. "Anonymous donor," he said. Elena arched a brow. He smiled. "Let's just say, silence isn't as popular as it used to be." By spring, the Catherine Moore Fellowship launched its first cohort. 12 nurses, different cities, different backgrounds, same fire in their eyes. They weren't here to just pass exams. They were here to ask questions no one used to answer. And Elena, she didn't sit in the front of the room. She sat beside them. Because the point wasn't to lead from above. It was to rise together. Spring came late that year. Boston shook off winter like a tired coat. And Harper-Sloane's courtyard began to bloom again. Pink magnolias, soft hyacinths, and carefully curated beds of white roses planted for donors and plaques. But this spring there was a new flower in the garden, one no one had expected. It started with a simple announcement posted in the staff newsletter. "Join us for a dedication ceremony honoring Nurse Catherine Moore, whose legacy has shaped the future of our institution." At first, staff murmured, was it real? Was it performative? Was it too late? But on the morning of the ceremony, the courtyard was full, not just with nurses and board members, but with patients, families, and former staff who hadn't walked these halls in decades. At the center of the garden stood a new statue. It wasn't towering. It wasn't gold. It was simple, bronze, life-sized. Catherine Moore, holding a clipboard, wearing a soft, calm smile, standing tall. Below her feet an inscription. She warned them. They silenced her, but the truth still bloomed. Elena stood beside the base, wearing a dark blue dress, her hands clasped tightly. Next to her was Aunt Geneva, who hadn't stopped crying since they arrived. When the crowd quieted, Dr. Holloway stepped forward. Her voice shook as she read from the podium. "Some institutions plant gardens to cover their guilt. Today we plant one to honor someone who saw the weeds long before we did and tried to pull them out." She turned to Elena. "Would you like to say a few words?" Elena stepped up slowly, took the microphone, and paused. She looked out over the faces, nurses in scrubs, janitors, doctors, residents, even the mailroom staff. Some of them still didn't know what to say to her, but they were here. That was enough. She spoke softly, letting every word land. "My mother didn't come here to make history. She came to do her job. She came to care. She came to speak up when something was wrong." A breeze moved through the garden. She was called emotional, difficult, a liability. She was fired and forgotten. But what she left behind was a standard. Elena looked at the statue again. "She taught me that truth doesn't always win in the moment. But if you plant it deep enough and protect it, it grows." She stepped down. Geneva took her hand. The applause was quiet, but real, and that was enough. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Elena returned alone to the garden. She sat on the bench across from the statue. She didn't speak. She just looked at her mother's face, cast in bronze, lit by the soft glow of the courtyard lights. Then her phone buzzed, a voicemail. No name attached. She hit play. The voice was scratchy. Recorded. Digitized. But unmistakable. Her mother. If you're hearing this, it means you didn't back down. It means you found the file. It means you're stronger than I was allowed to be. And that means I did my job. Elena didn't cry. She just smiled, closed her eyes, and listened. 1 year later, the Catherine Moore Fellowship had grown from 12 nurses to nearly 200. Some were in Boston, others in Detroit, Chicago, Memphis, New Orleans. Each one had a different story, a different accent, a different reason for applying. But they all had one thing in common. They were walking into rooms where no one expected them, and staying long enough to change the temperature. Elena didn't oversee day-to-day operations anymore. She had passed the torch to a small, diverse leadership team, 3 nurses, 1 public health advocate, and a young medical student from Baltimore named Zara. Zara reminded her of herself at 25. Hungry, smart, not here to impress anyone, just determined to leave the door open behind her. Elena still consulted, still mentored, still listened, but she no longer needed to be everywhere, because now the movement had legs of its own. One afternoon, she returned to the Harper-Sloane courtyard. The statue still stood bronze-weathered now by sunlight and rain. There were flowers at its base, a stethoscope someone had placed gently in her mother's hands, a folded note that read simply, "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like in scrubs." She sat on the bench nearby as she often did, not to grieve, not to watch, but just to be near the place where the story had turned. Later that week, a first-year nursing student stopped her in the hallway, wide-eyed, nervous, clutching a textbook like a shield. "Excuse me," the girl said. Are you Elena Moore?" Elena smiled. "Yes, I wanted to say thank you. I joined the fellowship. And before I did, I almost didn't apply. I didn't think someone like me could belong in a place like this." Elena nodded. "I used to think that too." The student hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of carrying so much?" Elena paused, then shook her head gently. "No," she said, "because I'm not carrying it alone anymore." The girl smiled, cheeks red with relief, then hurried off to class. That night, Elena sat in her apartment writing. She wasn't working on a statement or a policy or a speech. She was writing a letter to someone who didn't exist yet, a future nurse, a future student, a future fighter. She folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and wrote a name on the front, "To the one who comes next." She placed it in a box beside her desk, the same box her mother had once filled with evidence. But this time it wasn't about warning. It was about welcoming, because now the room was bigger. The silence had been broken. The door was open, and inside there were more chairs than ever before. She didn't set out to make history. She only wanted to do the job her mother had once been denied. But by standing firm, by speaking truth into silence, and by planting something that could grow long after her, Elena Moore became more than a nurse. She became a bridge, a beginning, for every voice that's ever been ignored, for every name that was buried too soon, for every daughter who was told to wait her turn. This story wasn't just about justice. It was about legacy. And now, it belongs to all of us. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you think, consider subscribing, because here we tell the stories of quiet revolutions and the ordinary people who start them. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget whose shoulders you're standing on.